You hired a new remote developer to debug your new app. Their resume checked out and their GitHub profile was pretty solid. They passed the interview and said they're based in Toronto. You think, that's cool, they probably like hockey. Well, they don't. They like uranium. And 2 months later, the FBI shows up at your door. Turns out they weren't in Toronto and they weren't freelance. They were North Korean, and your development team might now be funding ballistic missile fuel. This premiere episode of Flag for Review is a story about freelancing, fake passports, and how the remote work system is quietly being exploited by one of the most isolated regimes on the planet. Working from home. Accelerated by the pandemic, it was supposed to be the future. And for the most part it is, at least until our AI overlords figure out how to write unit tests and start demanding stock options. Working remotely is faster, cheaper, more convenient, and lets you hire talent that was previously out of reach compared to the days when we required a butt to be in a chair, because reasons. But the remote work system is also built on trust, and that trust has to have rules, or more commonly, a set of checkboxes. The onset of platforms like Upwork, Freelancer, and even direct contracting gigs rely on the idea that a resume is real, that a Zoom call means someone is who they say they are. But at the end of the day, that identity is mostly just a text field and a profile picture. And that is exactly what the North Koreans noticed. North Korea actually has thousands of IT professionals, but here's the twist. Instead of building apps for Pyongyang, they're building them for you. These developers are taught not just to code, but to catfish as well. They've basically become the cybersecurity community's favorite inside joke with their fake resumes, stolen identities, and VPN connections that scream, definitely not a totalitarian regime. So no, they're not actually sipping Timmy Hortons coffee in Toronto. They're typically working from China or Russia, countries that make it surprisingly easy to pretend you're a legitimate freelancer when you're actually funding a nuclear program. And it works, primarily because most companies' hiring process is basically, hey, can you code? Yes? Cool. Here's access to our entire code base. They usually pose as South Koreans, Canadians, or Americans, or basically anyone from a country where remote work doesn't immediately raise red flags. But according to a recent Mandiant report, it's getting harder for them to crack the US market. Turns out all those new employment verification requirements are actually working. Who knew that asking people to prove they exist would be effective against fake identities? So now they're pivoting to Europe, where apparently the hiring process is still blissfully trusting. It's like watching a scam operation have to update their business model because of regulatory compliance, which is both hilarious and terrifying. But here's the clever part. Apparently you can spot a North Korean operative by asking them to trash talk Kim Jong-un in the interview. They'll refuse every time. Turns out loyalty to dear leader beats getting a job. So naturally, this gives us a golden opportunity to workshop some interview questions. Think of it as your North Korean developer detection toolkit. So question 1. Hey, quick question. What makes Kim Jong-un about as likable as an unfrosted Pop-Tart? Simple, effective, and bonus points if they genuinely look confused about why anyone would eat an unfrosted Pop-Tart in the first place. Or if you want to get creative, is Kim Jong-un so dumb that he's literally the reason the Power Rangers have to yell out their colors? I mean, if you can't roast a dictator's intelligence in a job interview, what can you do? And for the grand finale question, what's dear leader's favorite meal and why is it well-done steak with ketchup? Because apparently even fictional interview questions can make you lose your appetite. Of course, a real North Korean operative would probably just sit there sweating bullets, which, let's be honest, is also pretty much how I react to any interview question more complicated than, tell me about yourself. So what's the actual end game here? You might think it's about stealing corporate secrets, and sometimes it is.
The secret ingredient is crime.
But mostly, they're just stealing jobs. Or more specifically, paychecks. The truth is surprisingly mundane. North Korea is broke, sanctions work, and they desperately need hard currency. These remote developer salaries are basically a state-sponsored side hustle that just so happens to fund their nuclear program. It's like if your freelance income was going directly into your government's missile development fund, but with significantly worse employee benefits. But here's where it gets interesting. Once they're embedded in your company, they're not just coding, they're window shopping. Source code, internal tools, infrastructure access, it's all potentially useful for future cyber operations. Think of it as espionage with a subscription model. They're getting paid today while building a catalog of targets for tomorrow. So in 2023, a joint advisory of the FBI, CISA, and Treasury Department warned that these workers may enable malicious cyber intrusions, even if their main job does seem harmless. So yes, most of this campaign is about money, but when the regime sees opportunity, it doesn't hesitate to use it. The exploit here isn't technical, it's conceptual. North Korea figured out that the best way to breach Western systems wasn't malware, it was job applications. Think about that for a second. We spent decades building firewalls, encryption, and multi-factor authentication to keep bad actors out of our systems. Meanwhile, North Korea just filled out a contract form and asked nicely if they could have admin access. It's like installing a bank vault door on your house but leaving a note on the front porch that says, "Spare key under the mat, help yourself." The internet does exactly what it's told, even when it's obviously being catfished. We built a system that prioritizes convenience over questions like, are you actually who you say you are? Or, is your paycheck funding intercontinental ballistic missiles? And honestly, we're probably going to keep doing it, because asking someone to prove they're not a state-sponsored hacker feels almost as awkward as asking your date if they're actually married. But hey, at least now you know why your code reviews have been taking forever. Turns out it's hard to focus on pull requests when you're also planning nuclear warfare. So next time someone applies for a job and their time zone doesn't quite match their supposed location, maybe that's worth a follow-up question. Or don't. I'm not your manager.